Thank you for joining us. This is Road to Rescue. This is a new show here on Parable of the Vineyard, and I'm Sean Griffin here with my co-host,
Ken Heidebrecht. Hello, guys. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Ken. Thanks for joining me on this new broadcast, man. I know that we already do a show on another channel together on Honor of Kings over on Kingdom of Context, which is my channel. But Adam asked us to come on and because we had an idea for a new show, and we wanted to have us come on to his channel and just kind of share this, what I think is an exciting message, because every single prophet in the Bible talks about this. And it's including Yeshua, right? Everybody's talking about it.
Everyone.
I want to be talking about what everybody's talking about. Right. So that's, yeah. I'm excited
kind of
about
the premise of our show, right, Sean? The Road to Rescue, why we called it that, is because everything that we're going to really discuss over the course of this, the show, will just be surrounded by our title, right? The Road to Rescue, because
that's right.
There's so many things that are leading up to our road to rescue, which is coming. Our Messiah, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Hey, are you seeing the screen flip back and forth?
I'm not. No.
No, I'm not either. It's supposed to flip back and forth whenever each of us talk, but I'm not seeing it flip back and forth. And you can hear me just fine. Is that right?
I can hear you just fine. Yep.
Yeah. I wonder what's going on there. Well, we'll have to do our best. We'll just manage it manually in that case, the cameras.
Sure.
If they're not switching automatically.
You can do that on your end, Sean, or
I think each of us can. So
I'm our little box on the bottom right.
Yeah, I think that well, maybe, I don't know. Adam's telling us it is flipping, so maybe it's just not showing us.
Okay.
So either way, sorry guys.
We'll work out the bugs, guys. This is the first.
Yeah, there's always
always
the live issues. You're trying to figure out what people are seeing. So, but thanks for joining us. The Road to Rescue. The whole point of this show is that we were going to show how all the prophets speak of the coming of the day of the Lord, and this is the moment when Yeshua returns, and how even as far back as Enoch, he's talking about it. He's describing it. He's encouraging us to know it, to understand it, to look for the signs of its return, to know how to discern what those are, so that way we're not deceived. So this is kind of our heart and our passion, is that people understand the multitude of references all throughout the books, not just of the canon, of the modern American canon, I should say, of 66, but also within the apocryphal and extra biblical books. It's layered everywhere, isn't it, Ken?
Literally everywhere, man. Yeah, absolutely. And the apostles talk about it like crazy as well, and we're going to cover a whole slew of different perspectives as it pertains to this topic.
Yes. So, well, I guess without further ado, I'm just going to jump into Joel 2. That's what we'll start out with, and we're going to just kind of pepper some scriptures in this first episode and give people an idea of all the different references, because there's, I think, Ken, one time you went through and counted all the different idiomatic terms that reference the day of the Lord. And there's just a ton of them.
Yeah, there's many synonyms for the day of the Lord, and even after I had counted them, I found even more. So
that's right. And I think in the book of Enoch, which many people on this channel are probably already familiar with, because Adam is he's beefed up on the book of Enoch as well. He's probably mentioned the term the consummation of the age many times. And that's a common term used within Enoch to speak about the day of the Lord, which is the return of the Messiah, right? The Son of God. And that's why we see later in Enoch, the actual Son of Man is mentioned. And so that's why I'm just so excited, because even though we've got different personalities, we've got different prophets speaking with different visions, they're all speaking about the same thing from just a slightly different adjusted perspective, if you will. But ultimately, it's all the same central theme, and that is victory, for the Son of Man when he returns. And but I'm an aspiring writer in my private life, and I'm fascinated with the overall collection that the Father has done throughout the ages through his Spirit to inspire, whether through through leading them to write as he directed them, or to show them a blatant vision. And you put all their words together, and it's like a grand masterpiece of just highlighting his Son, and how the Son of Man, our Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, is going to come back literally as the King of Glory, and it'll be a day no one will ever miss. and no one will ever forget. And I lovingly say no one will ever miss, because, Ken, you and I, we discuss theology with a lot of people, and social media is a great opportunity to do that, right? Because you can connect with people from all over the world. And very often, we run into folks that are lean towards preterist theology, and a preterist theology thinks that the day of the Lord has already happened, and I'm just like, oh no, no one will ever miss it, and it changes the world forever. It starts a new age of how it's not a difference of dispensation, but it's just a new age in how literally the Son of Man is on the earth. And so I'll just jump right into Joel 2 real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's verse 1. It says, blow a trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. Surely it is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. As the dawn is spread over the mountains, so there is great and mighty people that has never been anything like it, nor will there be again after it, to the years of many generations. A fire consumes before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but a desolate wilderness behind them, and nothing at all escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses, so they run. With a noise as of chariots, they leap on the tops of the mountains, like the crackling of a flame of fire consuming the stubble, like a mighty man arranged for battle. Before them the people are in anguish. All faces turn pale. They run like mighty men. They climb the walls like soldiers. They each march in line, nor do they deviate from their paths. They do not crowd each other. They march everyone in his path. When they burst through the defenses, they do not break ranks. They rush on the city. They run on the wall. They climb into the houses. They enter through the windows like a thief. Before them the earth quakes. The heavens tremble. The sun and moon grow dark. The stars lose their brightness. The Lord utters his voice before his army. Surely his camp is very great. For strong is he who carries out his word. The day of the Lord is indeed great and very awesome, and who can endure it? So,
that's
there's
so much there.
So much there. Yeah, there's a lot of details to pick out that I think that are important. What stands out to you first, brother?
Well, Sean, I wanted to ask you from verse 3 onward, essentially, who's being referred to here? A fire consumes before them, and behind them a flame burns. I think we both agree on who this is, but
to me, this is Matthew 25:31. These are the angels, Yeshua's angels that he's coming back with. This is the army that we see in the book of Enoch, the innumerable army that stands waiting for the day of the Lord.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when I found that out, when I was reading this and researching this chapter, my jaw dropped to the floor. I was just like, man, because we're told, the whole Joel 2 army in church is essentially believers, right?
Unfortunately, that's been a modern interpretation of this passage. But
just as you read, man, as you go verse through verse, the descriptions here are not describing any human man. And, it's just
hopefully as a believer, I'm not climbing in windows like a thief. So,
lighting the place up everywhere you go.
Yeah, and I love it that there's that little subtle nod when it says in verse 3, the land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but a desolate wilderness behind them. Because this land that they're coming into and that they're burning with complete fire, which is what we see in Matthew 13:36 through 43, about how they clear out this area. They're burning anything that's left, in my opinion, anything that's left over, if I could say it like that. Because there's multiple things happening here in this event, and we're going to get into deeper parts of that. But this particular facet of angels that we're seeing as they move through the land of promise, and that's what the land is, in my opinion, that they're moving through. As they're moving through the land of promise, nothing escapes, because they're clearing everything out of this specific geography. Why would they be doing that, Ken?
It's because they're doing what any builder would do. When they want to, put their house down. They need to clear a foundation for it, right? And there's things in the way, or people's in a way.
Yeah.
They need to get out of there.
That's right. Yeah, it's the house of God, the paradise of God is about to come down. They're literally clearing a path. And as we read in other places, other descriptions, there's an earthquake and there's some other things happening. So we're going to discuss all these details because this is a grand scene. There's multiple things happening at the same time. Yeah. And we're just digging into pieces of it. And this piece shows the angels that are coming back with Yeshua, these warrior angels. It says their appearance of horses. and like war horses, so they run. And that's obviously entailing something that's really powerful, right?
Yeah.
They're consuming things like stubble. I believe there's also a mention in Isaiah 33, 13, just about how he turns the wicked to chaff with the consuming fire, and no one can endure it.
Yeah.
And it says they run like mighty men. I'm not looking in the Hebrew right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it uses the word Gibberim in verse 7 right there. They run like mighty men. They climb the walls. They each march in line. They do not deviate from their paths. This whole idea here is that they're unstoppable. That's the idea. If anyone that's ever studied, rankings and battle formations and war, to not break rank and for your soldiers to stay in formation as they move, that was the goal, right? Because that was what gave them strength and power as a unit as they were fighting. To break rank would be to either to try to put a wedge in between them, or distract them by flanking them so that you could divide and conquer. Literally, that was kind of the idea. But it's not going to be happening. No one's going to be dividing and conquering these angels, right?
Well, no, especially when you realize that we're told, and I think it's Second Baruch, we're given the name of the angel that actually wiped out the 185,000 Assyrians that were encamped around Jerusalem. And so
That's true.
We've got one angel, Sean, taking care of 185,000 people.
That's right.
Well-trained, armed Chaldeans, and
what was it?
Myriads and myriads and myriads of holy ones coming on the day of the Lord. So it's it's not fair. It isn't fair for who has to try and attempt to oppose this.
Well, that's why when it talks about in Revelation 9, the 200 million chimera-like things that come up out of the pit, and Apollyon comes up with them, and he's the king over them. And I mean, that's 200 million of the bad guys right there. And then in Revelation 16, I think it's verse 18, talks about the three demonic spirits that come out of the mouth of the false prophet, the beast, and the dragon, and they go out into the earth and gather all the kings of the earth and their armies for battle. And then they all end up meeting in the Valley of Armageddon, which is also referred to in Scripture as the Valley of Jezreel. And that's going to be just a little bit southwest of Mount Carmel in this huge valley. And it obviously would fit 200 plus million entities. It's a massive, massive area that's a flatland in between these mountains. And that's the famous place where it says the blood will reach the bridle of the horse, because they're just going to get slaughtered, And that's not because they're getting slaughtered because they're coming up against Yeshua's returning, and you couldn't defeat him anyway. But you're coming up against all these angels as well. Yeah. And like you just talked about, we have Ramil, which I believe Enoch 20 is that gives us the name of the angel of the Lord, Ramil.
Enoch 20, yeah.
Yeah. And then he's the one that takes credit in the book of Baruch for taking out the 185,000 Assyrians in the days of Hezekiah. Yeah, and he actually explains, doesn't he? He explains how he does it. He says he didn't even destroy their armor and their breastplates and their shields. He just burned their bodies from within, so that the people that would see all those dead bodies would know it was not man that did that.
Yeah, it was a miraculous event. Yeah,
it was a miraculous thing, and that's, man, I can't even imagine. I don't think Hollywood would even try to broach that scene in any movie, right? Because they never want to obviously give power to God and righteous judgment, right? So they always want to twist it anyway whenever they try to do biblical themed movies or whatever. But can you imagine that scene? You got a kid walking outside of Jerusalem that morning, and he realizes the camp is quiet, or just as
ghastly, man, it would be ghastly.
It would be crazy. The day breaks and the watchman on the wall realizes nobody's moving, and the massive crowd outside that's been outside for a while of the city, and suddenly you're just realizing, oh my gosh, they're not moving. What's going on? I'm just wondering, because remember, they were holed up in Jerusalem because they were being besieged by was it Azarhaddon, the king of Assyria? I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't remember which name it was.
Sorry. But yeah, and that's why Hezekiah was praying for deliverance from them, because they were holed up in the city being besieged. And how long before they came out and saw those dead bodies? Just one angel took out all those people. And here we got myriads and an entire multitude of army of angels coming back with Yeshua.
Yeah.
So,
and from what I can tell, Sean, Ramael isn't even the toughest out of the angels.
Right. Yeah, he's not the one that grabs the dragon. That's Phanuel and Michael and Uriel and Raphael. Is that right? So
that's right. Yeah, Sean. So in verse 11 here from Joel 2, where it says that Yahweh utters his voice before his army, that just reminded me of a passage that I'm reading out of Habakkuk in a few minutes. I just wanted to quickly bring up verse 16 from Habakkuk chapter 3, where it says, chapter 3 rather, where it says, when I heard, my belly trembled, my lips quivered at the voice. Rottenness entered into my bones, and I trembled in myself, that I might rest in the day of trouble. When he cometh up unto the people, he will invade them with his troops. So this is interesting, man, because we're getting another, like you said earlier at the beginning, this is a synonym for the day of the Lord, right? The day of trouble. That's another reference directly to the exact same day. And so Habakkuk is essentially being given a vision of what's to come on the day of the Lord, and he's experiencing as if it's happening to him, and he's seeing that Yahweh sends his troops to invade the people that we just mentioned in Joel 2. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. It's and just watching this, it's got Habakkuk trembling, Yeah, and which is why we also see that same reaction from Enoch, don't we?
Yeah,
when he sees that innumerable army standing before the throne, he's like, "Who are these people? It's amazing. It's terrifying."
Yeah,
I'm kind of paraphrasing, obviously, but but yeah, he has kind of the same reaction. He's just aghast and in shock and amazement. Actually, hey, do you want to read? Do you want to read from Habakkuk 3?
Yeah, sure, I can do that right now.
Because there's some pretty juicy stuff in there leading up to that verse that you just mentioned.
Yeah, totally, man.
Looks like
3 to 15.
Let me see. Habakkuk 3. Yeah, if you start probably in around like verse 3, I think that's probably a lot of description in there.
All right, so it says that God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. Their perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. Was Yahweh displeased against the rivers? Was thine anger against the rivers? Was thy wrath against the sea, that thou didst ride upon thine horses and thy chariots of salvation? Thy bow was made quite naked, according to the oaths of the tribes, even thy sword. Selah, thou didst cleave the earth with rivers. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed by. The deep uttered his voice and lifted up his hands on high. The sun and moon stood still in their habitation. At the light of thine arrows they went, and at the shining of thy glittering spear. Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for the salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundedst the head of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation unto the neck. Selah. And thou didst strike through with his staves the head of his villages. They came out as a whirlwind to scatter me. The rejoicing was as to devour the poor secretly. Thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great waters. When I heard, my belly trembled, and I just read this. My lips quivered at the voice, rottenness entered into my bones, and I trembled in myself, that I might rest in the day of trouble. When he cometh up unto the people, he will invade them with his troops.
Okay, man, I see a couple things I want to talk about. One, it looks like the passage I read in Joel 2. I think it was in verse 10, Joel 2, verse 10. It talks about before them the earth quakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, the stars lose their brightness. And then you look in Habakkuk 3, and it looks like in verse 11 that you just read, sun and moon stood in their places. They went away at the light of your arrows, at the radiance of your gleaming spear. We also see another reference, which I didn't make any notes on, but we see another reference in Isaiah 30 about the sun being affected on the day of the Lord. And, so it seems to me, and this is why Zephaniah 1 talks about it being a day of darkness and gloom. Just like I believe at the beginning of Joel 2, it talked about, verse 2, a day of darkness and gloom, of clouds and thick darkness that spread over the mountains. So this is where, to me, this is a strange day, because if I'm not mistaken, is this saying kind of like in the days of Joshua that the sun and moon are going to stand still?
Yeah, verse 11 is saying that the sun and moon stood still in their habitation. So, It appears to me that they're not moving, literally.
Yeah. Which, I hope everyone on this channel is familiar with the biblical creation model, because that is going to help you understand this context to some of the placement of some of these things we're talking about. So just like in the days of Joshua, when, you had the sun and moon standing still for a certain amount of time for battle, but it doesn't say that the sun and moon lost their brightness, though. Whereas this one is talking about not only are they still, but they're not going to shine properly. And that, to me, I'm sure there's clouds out, but we also see other passages about the stars falling to the ground on the day of the Lord. So yeah, it's hard to keep your brightness above the firmament if you're falling to the ground. But as far as the sun and moon, to me, it seems almost as if the actual biblical creation model was affected so greatly that the sun and the moon stopped shining. Because as we've already read, Ken, in the book of Enoch, it claims the moon gets its energy from the sun. It charges up over time.
Yeah,
I think it's verses chapter 77, 78, maybe.
Yeah, and the moon receives what, 1/7? Was it 1/7 the portion of the sun?
Yeah, it grows over time, the waxing and waning process, and it's not reflecting the sunlight like in the heliocentric model teaches, but the biblical creation model teaches that it's actually charging up. Right? It's almost like you've seen those glow in the dark material. You put the light on it, and then you turn the lights off, and it shines real bright. But if you don't do that and you turn the lights off, it shines very little. And so it's kind of the best analogy I can think of for the moon, according to the book of Enoch. And we're seeing application of that idea here in Habakkuk 3 and Joel 2, where sun and moon seem to be affected at his return.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's just going on with verse 11 here. It says, they went away at the light of your arrows, at the radiance of your gleaming spear. So the light, that kind of, it reminds me of the movie 300, where, our arrows will blot out the sun. And then Buddy says, well, we shall fight in the shade. Well, with this day of the Lord, these arrows are radiant beams of light, essentially, right? And they're overpowering the radiance of the sun, probably, that you wouldn't even tell that there's a sun, because they're going to be so bright, on top of the brightness of, the angels and the Son of Man coming. It's going to be a bright day.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. To me, it's almost as if the light bulbs in a big room are turned off, and that's why when he comes back, he's every eye will see him. Revelation 1:7, because he's the only light in a huge darkened room. Yeah. It's kind of the picture I see in my head, and that's where you would have people trembling, absolutely trembling.
I mean, Sean, we're even told that every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, and this is in reference on to the day of the Lord, and those in heaven above, on the earth, and below the earth. So they're going to see, somehow they're going to see this below the earth, this event, right?
Well, there's massive earthquakes. We haven't even got to those descriptions yet. I mean, we got,
but somehow the earth shifts in such a way that they're going to be able to see this, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not. There's massive land movement on the day of the Lord. Yeah. Probably the best, most generic way, without going into all those verses right now. That's definitely going to be for another episode. Well, hopefully by the end of this, just after 5 or 6 episodes, the viewer will start to realize how much of the scriptures and the prophets spoke on this topic, and that you will be amazed that hopefully, not only will you not be deceived if someone shows up in the future claiming they are Jesus returning, so you'll be able to quickly dispel that falsity, but you'll also be able to enjoy reading scripture, because you see just how much the prophets always spoke about this, and because they wanted us to know this day. That this, to me, this is one of the most, aside from the first coming and Yeshua becoming our atonement, and selflessly dying on the cross to become our high priest, this seems to be one of the most talked about themes in all of scripture.
Yeah, this is the day that Enoch goes into great detail over, and he blesses those who are going to exist on this day.
That's true.
He makes a massive blessing to those who are going to exist. So,
in fact, he starts out his entire book talking about this day in chapter 1, doesn't he?
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. But yeah, Sean, it's fascinating, because it's sad that there are those, as you had mentioned earlier, that take a preterist perspective to all these descriptions, right? It's because they don't understand, and they're not willing to take literally these descriptions, right? That's been a common issue in Christendom, is that people are just willing to make everything chalk it up to an idiom. It's figurative. It's poetry. It's all these things. And in doing so, it's just putting a shroud of obscurity over the mind of the believer when they're reading this stuff. They can't discern between what's true, what's literal. You know what I mean? So the day of the Lord, guys, is not an idiomatic expression for something like, armies are coming, because I've heard that one. I've heard that, when the Babylonians came and were attacking Jerusalem, all the descriptions that we're talking about the day of the Lord, they say is idiomatically supposed to be interpreted as an understanding that it's just poetic sounding, verbiage for armies are coming, right? And I don't take that perspective seriously at all, Sean. Just, you can't, right?
Yeah, there's so many details that we're about to get into that, to think that all this was fulfilled in 70 AD, the destruction of the Second Temple, the invasion, the slaughter of 500,000 Hebrews in Israel, this was a horrible event and everything, but all these descriptions we're talking about, the world is forever changed. So it should be pretty apparent that is a poor interpretation at best, is the way I could.
Doesn't Peter mention essentially, Sean, that this day is going to be likened to pretty much what the flood was like in the days of Noah, where catastrophic events took place on this earth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, let me read real quick from Isaiah 60, because there is in Isaiah 60, we have another mention of this concept. I'll just read verse 1. It says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes round about and see. They all gather together, they come to you. Your sons will come from afar, and your daughters will be carried in the arms. Then you will see and be radiant, and your heart will thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea will be turned to you. The wealth of the nations will come to you. A multitude of camels will cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba will come. They will bring gold and frankincense, and will bear good news of the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will minister to you. They will go up with acceptance on my altar, and shall glorify my glorious house. Who are these that fly like a cloud, and like the doves to their lattices? Surely the coastlands will wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish will come first, to bring your sons from afar, their silver and their gold with them, for the name of the Lord your God, and for the Holy One of Israel, because he has glorified you. Foreigners will build up your walls, and their kings will minister to you. For in my wrath I struck you, and in my favor I have had compassion on you. Your gates will be open continually. They will not be closed day or night, so that men may bring to you the wealth of the nations, with their kings led in procession. For the nation and the kingdom which will not serve you will perish, and the nations will be utterly ruined." So I see, first of all, I just want to throw out this, there's several big events that happen on the day of the Lord. Okay. We're going to go into all these descriptions as we read these passages about the day of the Lord. We're going to read these. And now, am I saying that every description we read happens literally on that day?
No.
Exactly. Yeah. So the day of the Lord is the time that Yeshua reigns, the millennial reign, the seventh day of creation. I mean, this is the seventh idiomatic day, and this is all of it is his day, right? Because he reigns on the earth and from Mount Zion. So I just want to share with people that the first resurrection happens on the day of the Lord, and this actually kicks off the day of the Lord. It happens at the last trumpet of Revelation 11. That seventh trumpet sealed, that seventh trumpet judgment is the first resurrection, and that is that
goes in line with what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, right?
That's right. Yeah.
At the last trumpet, everyone rises up from the dead.
Yeah, both I think it's 1 Corinthians 15, 51, and also 1 Thessalonians 4, 14 through 18. He talks about this, this last trump. The dead in Christ rise first. Those who are alive and remain will rise after them. But it's at this last trumpet with the shout of the archangel. You just read in Habakkuk 3 that the Lord's voice utters before his army. You know what I mean?
And you had read in Joel 2, verse 1.
And I read, that's right.
Trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm on my holy mountain.
So that trumpet you're seeing that blows right before he descends with his angels, that's the first resurrection event.
Yeah.
And this is what we see layered throughout other scriptures that we're going to eventually get to. But what I want to really discuss, though, is who this chapter is actually talking to in Isaiah 60. Some of you will have like little subtitles that your translators put in your version of the Bible that you're reading, but some don't. So if you're not gleaning it from the context of what it's talking about. But guys, this is talking about the New Jerusalem. This is talking to the New Jerusalem, which is called Zion in the Old Testament many times. And it is the actual paradise of God that ends up coming down through the firmament to be set down on the ground. And that's why it says things like, arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you. And this is the moment where all this has been waiting for this bride to be revealed and brought down to the earth. And that it says the nations will come to your light and the kings to the brightness of your rising. Because remember, Revelation 21 tells us this thing's massive. It's 1,500 miles squared. It's 1,500 miles tall. And when we keep that in perspective of the biblical creation model, everyone on the earth is going to see the New Jerusalem. I don't care if you're the furthest reaches of New Zealand or some coastline of Antarctica. If you understand the biblical creation model, you're going to see, even with visual perspective and things fading away because the eye only sees so far. But that's why I think the New Jerusalem is so big. Not just because it fills the land area of the promise, but also so that everyone will see the kingdom of God. And Mount Zion is within this massive city, and Yeshua sits on top of Mount Zion on his throne, so that literally, I hate to, Ken, I hate to use this analogy because, it's like a joke. It's like a bad joke almost, but it reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. It reminds me of the eye of, was it Sauron or whatever?
Sauron, yeah.
Sauron, yeah, the big eye it was at a really tall tower so it could see everything, right? Now, clearly that's a depiction of something bad. I'm just trying to say that, if there's anything I could possibly, just imagine, that's the mountain of Zion is going to be the tallest thing on the earth at this point. So no matter where you are on the circle of the earth, Isaiah 40:22, you're going to be able to see the top of Mount Zion. You're going to be able to see literally the throne of God in the distance with the brilliance of his light shining throughout the city, which is why it says the nations will come to your lights, because it will be, it will always be true north, all pun intended, right? It will always be, you'll know exactly where it is. You'll never be able to miss it. And I think that's amazing, because it says, lift up your eyes round about in verse 4 and see, they all gather to you. They come to you. Your sons will come from afar. Your daughters will be carried in the arms. Now, to me personally, I think this is speaking of this verse 4, speaking of the resurrection, because we also read in Isaiah 49 and Isaiah 66, it talks about Zion is actually speaking. And she says, well, who are these children that have already been reared and are coming to me? And the angels are bringing them in their arms. And that's us, the first resurrection. The sons and daughters of glorified into our royal priesthood. And I think that's fascinating that we just get a description from the perspective of the actual city of watching this happen.
Yeah.
And then it talks about, verse 5, how you will be radiant, your heart will be thrill and rejoice, because in this moment, she's considered the desolate woman. She's without inhabitants, and there's no animals that live there. It's just, it's the Zion is yet to be glorified and filled with those who are it's destined for, because it's the land of promise, but it's yet to have its actual inhabitants, if you will. So it's in a waiting period right now. And then it talks about the wealth of the nations will come to you. We actually see that in both Zechariah 14, also in Revelation 21. I believe it's verse 22 or something, but it just talks about how all the nations, the gold and silver is brought. We also see that Enoch chapters 51, or chapters 52 through 54, I believe, where all the wealth of the world is brought to Zion.